which is the four main takeaways for this program. Our first, to begin a communication program that starts I would suggest that you would be doing at least monthly communications, and then proceeding as you work with alumni and undergraduates together to really develop the programs as they go forward. The next major takeaway is to be working now to create your strategic plan for reopening and the contingencies based upon the different levels of occupancy that you may have in the fall. And we'll dig deeper into that, but again, working at this point proactively is going to pay dividends later as these different options take place. And then number three, reduce the potential for damage by employing some strategies now that we'll share. And then lastly, as we face this crisis, there will be major changes that are needed, and perhaps this is a good time to take a larger look and make some larger changes. So those are four of the big takeaways that we'll be looking at tonight. Starting with our main area of strategic planning, we would suggest that you approach this with an attitude of hope for the best, but plan for the worst. One of the things that we are hearing from both students and parents is a situation that I call the cruise ship reality. There's I'm sorry, we're getting some feedback from the members here. I'm going to be doing.
Could you share your screen, your PowerPoint, please?
I apologize for the technical problems here. This is the first time I've had this level of issue. So excuse me for just a second. I apologize. Okay, hopefully that's a little better. Are people seeing the strategic planning slide?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Again, my apologies. Thank you for pointing out the challenge there. As I was noting, that there's a big fear amongst the parents, especially, that putting a lot of people together in close quarters, similar to what's happened on cruise ships or the nursing homes, where a lot of people have gotten sick and the outbreak has spread rapidly, is of major concern. And so that's one of the attitudes and the concerns that we're going to have to address. And imperative measures include communication with all of your stakeholders, both your members, their parents, alumni, your financial partners, and key vendors, that those should all be part of a communication strategy that you're putting together. As far as chapter house operations go, a couple of big takeaways here. We're at the end of the move out period. There's been a lot of chaos in move out, where a lot of the students have just kind of thrown their belongings in a suitcase and returned home. So we have suggested that there be flexibility in move out and storage policies and procedures. Again, showing concern for our members and trying to help them get through a difficult time. This is one of the areas that may result in a little bit of extra cost to be incurred. Some of those costs you can consider passing on to the members. We did a service where we offered to box up belongings and store them for members for a small fee of, I think it was $25 per person if they needed that assistance. And that went a long way to quell a lot of concerns and fears with the parents and the members. I think one of the biggest issues that we recommend is making sure that your property is secured over the summer months. We've already seen an uptick in vandalism and in breaking and enterings into properties as the The population has been stressed with job losses and layoffs, and as the local community understands that these fraternities are empty, we've seen more break-ins and more damage. So we would recommend either hiring a house sitter or a caretaker for the summer months, potentially putting in a infrared alarm system that can have sensors that are covering the entry points and the large common areas that would bring a police response. Those can be put in fairly inexpensively, that it might be a good time to do that. And if you don't have measures in place like that, someone should be checking the facility on a regular basis, at least a few times a week. The next thing that we have to look at operationally, especially related to the fraternity house, is the stereotype, which is honestly well-deserved in cases, the stereotype that a fraternity house is not a clean environment. This is going to be the #1 concern that is faced by our members as well as their parents. We believe that if you aren't providing professional cleaning at this point, this is something that you really have to go with and consider for the future. And this is a case where we're going to have to spend money that may have been unplanned to address this problem, but without ensuring and communicating ahead of time your plans to provide an environment that is cleaned and disinfected regularly. I think we have a potential to lose even more occupants with members or parents that decide that they don't wish to live in a chapter house, even if they have a signed lease. So we would recommend employing professional cleaning as much as what makes reasonable sense to do. We would think a twice-a-week protocol would be appropriate, perhaps more in times when there's an outbreak. But beyond that, there are areas such as the dining area and kitchen that will require more frequent cleaning. This is a time where you should be addressing with your cleaning staff their cleaning procedures and protocols, making sure that they are using proper chemicals that will provide the disinfection. Understand that to do this properly, it's a two-step process where areas are first cleaned with a detergent and then they are sanitized or disinfected with typically a second chemical. If you're unsure of what chemicals that you should be using, reach out to your contractors or your property management staff. But beyond that, you might also consider communicating with a local janitorial wholesale operation. We found that they have been very helpful in sharing the procedures and the proper products that should be used. Additionally, we find that the cost for the chemicals through wholesale supply is likely to be less than perhaps what you're paying through a retail supply chain like Amazon.com or Home Depot or something such as that. Additionally, we believe that additional hygiene steps should be taken throughout most of the chapter houses. We're recommending that hand hygiene stations be placed at every entry, as well as every bathroom, and also in the kitchen and dining areas. We're finding that the lead times on products such as hand sanitizer, masks, and that sort of thing is currently in the neighborhood of 60 days out. So this would be an appropriate time to be determining what you need and making those orders so that they will show up prior to the start of classes and move-in. Additionally, we would recommend that additional hand soap dispensers be put by each of the sinks. We recommend the soft soap ones rather than the hard bars or the liquid. It seems to be used more and cause less problems with dispensing. but we would make sure that those are installed in all of your areas. And beyond that, all of your maintenance staff, whether it be cleaning staff, food service staff, the maintenance people that come into the house, it's important that you have a protocol for them that they are following COVID-19 safe work practices. They should be doing a self-check prior to each day before they report, taking temperatures and breathing tests. We need to make sure that they're practicing social distancing, wearing masks and gloves. Additionally, the masks and gloves are something that you may even consider supplying to make sure that they aren't transferring masks and gloves from one property to another and potentially bringing in contaminated PPE equipment. As far as cleaning, I think that the cleaning protocols have got to be increased to make sure that high touch point areas are cleaned and disinfected. This would mean door handles, railings, entry doors where people are pushing them with their hands or their arms. Certainly the flat surfaces of dining tables and mail areas, those sorts of things. If the cleaning staff use the appropriate products, they should have no problem with a thorough sanitation. Some people may want to consider or have received recommendations to go a step farther with a more elaborate decontamination system. We've investigated these, and we believe the one that holds the most promise and is most cost effective is a system that is based upon using an electrostatic sprayer to apply chlorine dioxide or a chlorine dioxide based decontaminant agent. This process has been around for over 50 years. It is the process that is used to decontaminate a lot of fruit and vegetables as they are processed for the retail area. This is a process that Marriott is using to decontaminate each of their sleeping rooms each time they have a new guest. Our investigation into this, we believe that let's say a 12,000 square foot fraternity house, which would typically sleep maybe 25 to 35 people, could be fully disinfected with this chlorine dioxide application in about 4 hours and somewhere between $400 and $600 in cost. Something like this may become necessary if you have a breakout of an illness within the chapter house to reassure parents and the members that the house has been properly decontaminated. If you do decide to use a process like this, or if you take the measures we suggest to update the cleaning specifications and work with your housekeeping staff, that's information that should also be communicated to the parents, making sure that they and the members know that the chapter house is going to be properly maintained in a clean state is the key factor that will get more people to return to your chapter house in the fall. There will also be many changes in food service. And just as it's appropriate to talk with your cleaning staff, this is a time you should be talking with your food service staff as well. It's important to understand what their safety and sanitation protocols will be, what changes they're making to the food service program, and when they will or will not serve if there's an outbreak or an illness in the chapter house. So those contingency plans and understanding and the planning for that is an important step to be put in place now, as well as to be ready to go right when the food service program starts up. So the food service staff should also be practicing social distancing and wearing the PPE equipment. I think the big thing is to make sure that their staff have been properly trained in the prevention of foodborne illnesses. And there's a national program called Safe Serve. Typically, each location is required to have a a manager or a chef that is trained in safe serve. When I say a location, this applies to restaurants and many of the catering operations. And largely those safe serve protocols will also be effective in the disinfection and prevention of the transfer of the COVID-19 virus. They should be regularly disinfecting the kitchen and dining areas at least daily. We would recommend that there's a verification that the staff is properly sanitizing all of their the dishes and pots and pans that are going through their operation. And for proper sanitation of the pots and pans and larger tablewares, that's typically done in a 3-bin sink. It needs to be a 3-step process where the first step is washing. The second step is rinsing, preferably in a hot water basin. And then the third bin of the sink is a sanitizing rinse with a sanitizing chemical added to it. We also recommend that your commercial dishwashing systems be serviced over the summer months to verify that they are sanitizing the dishes properly. There's 2 types of dishwashing systems related to sanitation. The first is a low temperature system that sanitizes by injecting a chemical into the rinse cycle. The other type is a larger commercial unit that includes a booster heater and is heating the water to 170 to 180 degrees and is sanitizing through the high heat. Whichever system you have, you want to make sure that it's operating properly, that you have the proper chemicals on site before the system or the program starts up. I think the biggest changes in food service is we really need to consider an end to buffet style meals. The salad bars and the serving trays, that sort of thing, where people are going through and loading up their plates, is not a safe protocol. These are areas that, at least for the foreseeable future, we should be changing, where the kitchen staff is creating plated meals and there aren't as many people, so they're not passing through the hands of as many people. We would also recommend that care is taken as to how silverware is distributed. Having all of the forks in a bin where people are just reaching in and grabbing a fork or a spoon, again, that is not a safe protocol given our current situation. For the fraternities that are using paper products, we would suggest purchasing the packages that include a plastic fork, spoon, and knife, as well as a napkin in a sealed package. That's something that can be distributed and keep the silverware or the plasticware more hygienic than it would be to just be handing out loads of forks or spoons, that sort of thing. So again, these are areas where you really need to be talking with your kitchen staff or your caterer to determine how they're doing it. We work with most of the national catering firms as well as several local groups. Most of the national companies are already sharing their protocols and what changes that they have done to their operations with their clients, and most of them are coming out with very strong programs. And understand that as we go through these changes in food service programs, again, we're likely to see some increased costs, and that's something that we have to work through. If you have a situation where your occupancy level drops significantly, it may not be cost effective to provide an in-house meal service program given the lower occupancy. Understand that for the caterers or your kitchen staff, that there's still the fixed cost of the wages and benefits that are being paid to the staff members, whether they cook for 10 or 50 people. So as the number of meals served goes down, costs are likely to go up. And so if that's a case where it gets to a point where it is not financially viable your group. You might look to share meal preparation with another group, perhaps a fraternity or sorority that's next door, or a company that specializes in preparing and delivering meals to the chapter house rather than preparing them on site. I do think this is an opportunity for a improvement in service from the standpoint that if you poll your members, you may find that they would prefer to have more meals served at the chapter house that are professionally prepared in a hygienic manner. A lot of the fraternities may run dinner-only programs 5 or 6 nights a week, or just a lunch and a dinner program. This might be a scenario where you poll your members and find that they would be more interested now in a 15 or an 18 meal a week program. Our experience is that the parents are happy to pay for that extra service, especially when there's a prospect that many of the restaurants have been closed down, or that they have to depend more heavily on delivery service with outside people bringing food in that could potentially have another method of transmitting a virus. So talk with your parents, make the adjustments that are necessary. If at all possible, provide a food service program, because we believe that that is an essential portion of creating a great chapter experience. And then as these decisions are made, continue to communicate those to the members and their parents. Another thing to really be considering at this point is working with your undergraduate chapter leaders to determine what's going to happen within the chapter house. Depending upon the level of the crisis as it may be in your local area, you may have situations where events are still being prohibited within the chapter houses. What are going to be the policies related to out-of-house members joining the chapter or coming to the chapter house? What is the process for recruitment, and how will that change? Do we need to consider different systems for the way that packages are delivered? Will we have to practice social distancing for the meals? Those sorts of things are all topics of discussion, and these things should be decided upon prior to move-in. There are some really good guidelines that are being distributed at this point through the Center for Disease Control, as well as the American Council for, the American College Housing Association. I will provide information when we distribute this slide deck and this program, but that's a great way to turn for the specific protocols that are being recommended, and then looking at them in a common sense approach. For instance, one of the recommendations from the ACHA right now is that there be that each of the students be housed in a single with its own bathroom. Well, obviously that's not going to be something that's going to work for most of our properties. So you have to take a look at those and make the adjustments that are sensible and realistic for your property and your operation. And it is certainly our recommendation that these decisions be made with your chapter leaders. I believe that if you were to take a strategy or a tactic where, let's say, the Alumni Corporation would hand down a bunch of new rules as to how things would have to act in the chapter house, the potential is that you're going to have a rebellion or resistance to that. But if the undergraduate chapter leaders are part of the process and they are educated in some of these protocols, I believe that as a group you'll come to the correct answers. It's also a time that we highly recommend that there be more alumni undergraduate interaction, whether that be chapter advisors that are working with the chapter to explore new ways to stay functioning as a chapter through virtual meetings, virtual study sessions, and we have a number of chapters that are doing recruitment virtually through the summer months. This is also a great time because everybody is spending a little more time in their house, typically to develop some alumni undergraduate interactions, whether that be for advising roles or career advice, mentoring. Those sorts of things can go a long way to continue that fraternity experience in a positive way. And then the last thing I highly recommend is that the advisors and the alumni leaders really communicate with the chapter members that this is something that we're going to get through, that we'll get through it and be strong as we come out of it. We'll continue to be a good fraternity or sorority. Most of our groups have been around for 50 to 200 years. And while we've seen blips in the curve or challenges before, this is something that we're going to get through. So providing an optimistic attitude and perspective to help some young people who may not have been through something like this before can go an awful long way. As I mentioned, it makes sense to develop an outbreak contingency plan, and that the Center for Disease Control is providing some great recommendations related to this. It's our recommendation that you develop a contingency plan if there's illness in the chapter house, that first that member is directed to seek medical assistance immediately. If there is an outbreak in the chapter, we would recommend that you tactfully inform others. We would suggest that it be done in a way that doesn't specifically identify the person, so that there could be any claims of problems through either HIPAA or the American with Disabilities Act. It's obvious within a chapter house that word is going to spread about who that person is and what the condition might be, but in any sort of public communications related to it, we would suggest that that person's privacy be protected. We would first suggest that if a person becomes ill, that they return home to seek treatment and for isolation. If that's not possible, we would suggest that there be policies where there would be a relocation within the chapter house. Some chapters may be large enough to have a room that is already identified as a room for people that are sick, or you might have an empty room someplace in the chapter house that can be dedicated for that. And you may relocate someone that is healthy to another room, maybe bunking with some other members temporarily, so that that member can be self-isolated in their own room. We would also suggest that a bathroom be designated to be used specifically by members that are ill. And again, if we are looking at a house that maybe only has 2 large group bathrooms, that can provide some inconvenience. Please use common sense in it. Obviously, if there's a room that would be a private room with its own bathroom, or a smaller bathroom that's typically shared by less people, that would be ideal. You probably have language in your lease agreement that allows you to change or update some of these policies if it becomes necessary. If all else fails, you might consider putting someone up in a hotel temporarily, whether that be a person that is well, so that the ill student could have their own room in the chapter house, or whether it is a person that may be sick that could relocate to a hotel temporarily. Beyond that, we would recommend that the touch points of that room, the doorknobs, the doors, and so forth, be sanitized consistently, and that the bathroom be sanitized daily. And beyond that, meals should be taken in the room, and members should be delivering and providing that assistance. Another thing that we are recommending to many of our chapter officers is that they designate an officer or a person within the house to be the health chairman. And they might decide to invest in a thermometer and a supply of masks and hand sanitizer. They might be a person that is frequently checking around the chapter house to see if anybody is symptomatic or needs any assistance. And just having someone acting as the point person and trying to keep the chapter house healthy, and to take appropriate actions when necessary. That makes sense. Related to this, another recommendation we have is for future leases, those that aren't already signed or those that may be distributed this fall for the following year, that those leases be updated with specific policies that allow you to relocate ill people within the chapter house, protocols for what happens if someone becomes sick, as well as perhaps a waiver of liability if someone gets sick within the chapter house. Those are things that we have attorneys working on, and we'll release language later as to what we would recommend be used for leases to try to give greater protection and flexibility in these cases going forward. So I'll break there for a second and ask if there are any specific questions that people may have. Okay, not hearing any specific questions. I see we've had a couple of people that joined late that I'm unmuting and allowing to talk, but
I did have a question. Can I verbally
yes,
do it? Or do I need
yes,
to,
please go ahead.
with regard to the common bathrooms, do you have any more thoughts on for instance, eight men on a floor, one common bathroom with 4 shower stalls? Would it help to assign 2 men to each shower stall so that they have the, you know, they use certain parts of that bathroom, or is that unrealistic?
Well, I think those are the sorts of things that I would talk with your men about. I suspect that the frequency of use of those facilities are, and the close proximity that people are in those areas are going to remain a challenge. But certainly trying to delegate certain areas for certain people, perhaps putting up additional plastic dividers between shower areas. When I say plastic, it can just be shower curtains on tension rods or things like that, to better separate areas. I think that makes sense. Maybe setting up some rotations of when the bathrooms are going to be used to try to have greater social distancing and separation. Maybe some things to be considered. You know, if you had a bathroom that would, you know, typically have 4 showers, maybe you only have 2 people showering and 2 other people in that bathroom at one time, to make sure that everybody has a level of separation, and that they are alternating the shower, you know, spacing or the sink spacing, those sorts of things, to try to maintain a higher level of distancing. So again, we have to understand that we're also dealing with typically 18 to 20-year-old young men, and who believe that they're invincible. So that might be a situation where you can make the good recommendations and communicate them, but seeing how they adhere to them is something that would be wise.
Sure.
So I see a written question here that comes in, and it happens to be from one of our clients, who says that we're operating their property, and it talks about, should we set up a meeting with the chapter advisor group and chapter leaders to review their health plans? And to that the answer is yes. For our clients, we are holding specific webinars in first to announce the protocols that we believe should be instituted and considered. And then we will be conducting a series of meetings with alumni and undergraduate leaders to develop the strategic plan for each of these properties. And when I talk about the strategic plan, it's not only cleaning and sanitation and spacing and food service, but it's also the communication plan with parents and what they need to be cautious about on campus if a further crisis breaks out with someone getting sick and some things of that nature. So for our clients directly, that is something that will be taking place beginning in June. I see another question that's come in. Has the possibility of having waivers signed before move-in in August been broached? There has been a great deal of communication about that, and certainly the waivers would provide some additional legal protection. The question is whether or not the members are going to sign those. Most will already have signed leases, and to sign a waiver or to sign an addendum to the lease is going to require all parties to sign, which may even include the parents. In our experience, I think we're going to get a fair amount of pushback on that. I think the strategy that we would use is to work with the chapter so that the leaders are part of a process that releases a set of new chapter policies and regulations that the chapter is supporting as to how they wish to act, and then maybe trying to include a little bit of the waiver language in that. If it's possible to get them signed, by all means do so. But for any leases that are yet to be signed or any leases that are distributed going forward, I would highly suggest that that waiver language be included in that. Any other questions related to these topics? I see John Wagner, it looks like, may have a question.
I already asked it.
Okay. Philip McCauley. Okay, maybe no question from Philip there.
No, I'm good, Ellen, I'm good.
Okay, very good. I see another question has come in. Not so much a question as a recommendation. Instead of setting up a separate room and bathroom for a brother, sister who tests positive, we have a medical doctor on one of our boards who believes it's better to get that person out of the house. Prior to beginning the semester, designate an apartment that members who test positive would immediately move. So that's a very good recommendation that came in from Wes Wicker. If you recall the slides that I had put up earlier, we identified that the best protocol is definitely to get that person out of the chapter house. So whether it be a hotel, a separate apartment that you might be available, I suspect that our universities are going to be providing quarters for students that get sick as well. Honestly, I think the best protocol is for that person to go home where they can get support, but there may be cases where that is just not practical. Again, please, whatever you can do to separate the healthy from the ill people and do it in a tactful manner, I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's move on with the finance section here. And we have gotten a tremendous amount of questions about how do we handle rent when students may have moved out of the chapter house 4 to 6 weeks before the end of their lease. Are they due a rent refund? Should we be providing some sort of rebate? I can tell you that none of our clients have offered any particular refund or rebate policy. And in talking through with many other people that are involved in fraternity and sorority life, as well as looking at what other campus landlords have done, we have seen very few people providing a refund. We have seen cases where, that I believe make sense, where chapter dues have been prorated or applied to next year's dues payments because the chapter hasn't been able to conduct its programs for the semester. We have seen food service prices that are adjusted because food service was discontinued earlier in the chapter or earlier in the semester. And if the chapter had a reasonable contract with their catering company, they were able to make adjustments and reduce costs in that particular protocol. But we've seen very few situations where there have been a refund of rent out there. This is a situation where we have seen our delinquency rate about triple over the last few months. Certainly there are a good share of our members whose families are experiencing challenges through layoffs or the loss of jobs. Additionally, there's a certain segment out there that is just saving their money to try to get through the crisis. And while we have seen an increase in delinquencies, we found that the vast majority of people are being very upfront and very honest and cooperative in these situations. You know, they've generally shared that once they're able to get back to work, that they'll be happy to develop a payment plan, that you know, that they're able to you know, provide or commit to payments at a later date based upon finances that they have and getting through the COVID scenario. So it's our suggestion to be very strategic and tactful as how you approach the collections scenario. First, you need to show empathy, understand that they're going through a difficult time, work out the payment plans, and we're offering to waive late fees and not take any further collection actions if they'll sign a written payment agreement to work out the payments at some future time within the next 12 to 18 months. Understand that many states have placed a moratorium on evictions, and while there is no moratorium on taking collection actions, we would suggest being very strategic with that. If you are perceived to be too heavy-handed with that, I think that that might prohibit or create a concern amongst the members and parents that might reduce occupancy either for move-in this fall or for the future. So in general, before we're taking any more direct collection action, we're going to make sure we get through move-in and we're on the road to recovery in doing so. And again, just understand that if you were to take legal or other actions, that's a long process that has costs involved. We would think that you'd be better off preserving those assets to help weather the storm rather than to pursue a collection action that may not be successful at any rate for a year to 2 years. We continue to sign leases even through this. It's very obvious that the members wish to be back on campus. First, we recommend signing leases early in the fall with the returning members and with the new members that are involved in the fall recruitment process. But for some of our new clients who have not already gotten through their lease signing process, we're continuing to move through that and finding that it's slow, but people are still signing leases. I suspect that most of the universities are going to make a go, no-go decision about fall classes somewhere around the 15th of June. And that when that happens, those that are sitting on the fence will likely sign those leases. In some cases, you're going to get parents that just say, hey, I've lost my job. I can't sign a lease at this point until I'm sure of our financial condition. Again, show empathy, share that you'll touch base in 45 days, share that you still want their son or daughter to be living in the chapter house and having that experience. You know, we would suggest that if you get to that point before move-in and someone is still on the fence, that it might even be a scenario where your alumni board offer that person some sort of housing scholarship you know, if they're able to pay 75 or 80% of their rent, and they would receive a scholarship related to hardship for the other 25%, you're probably better off than you would have been otherwise, and you have another person that gets that residential fraternity experience that's so valuable. In some cases, if nothing else works, to get a person to sign a lease, at this point, we will consider putting in some form of contingency. We would suggest that the contingency be something like what we've written on the screen, that would just postpone the date the lease would start until in-person classes resume, rather than terminating the lease outright. You know, if you terminate the lease because fall classes don't start, you're going to have an empty chapter house probably for the entire year. Whereas if you can just defer the lease and postpone this start date until the beginning of the semester that chapters do start, you'll be able to at least maintain some level of revenue going forward. For your alumni house corporation members, we would suggest that you really be considering looking at different cash flow projections. For our clients, we've run cash flow projections looking at a 15% reduction, which appears, based upon the studies that are going on out there, to be what is currently forecast is what the reduced occupancy or the reduced return to campus rate is going to be for sophomores through seniors. The most recent study showed a 12 to 15% expected reduction. We would suggest running the numbers considering a 50% reduction, which might be a scenario in which fall semester classes have been retained as an online format without people back on campus, and then consider a scenario if the entire operation has to be shut down for the year. And if you're budgeting for that, based on previous experience, we can share that it's generally costs between 60 and 70% of your typical full expenses to continue to operate the chapter house, even if it's vacant, because insurance and taxes and there's other expenses that are still required that are likely going to be perhaps 60 to 70% of your total operating budget. So, you know, again, this is hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Knowing what sort of decisions you would have to make in order to meet these different types of challenges will pay benefits, so that when things are determined, you're able to make the decisions that are necessary. And until it becomes very clear as to what's going to happen related to classes on the campus, we would suggest that you would really preserve your cash reserves. As the saying goes, cash is king. The more that you can retain liquidity of your finances in your bank accounts, the better probability is that you're going to be able to withstand a longer shutdown if that becomes necessary. We would suggest that if you have a line of credit, which is a wise thing for many house corporations to have, that you would pull those funds and perhaps put that in a savings account in a different bank. During the Great Recession of 2007 through 2009, we saw many cases, especially in Michigan, where we're so closely tied to the auto industry that was suffering, that a lot of banks immediately canceled the lines of credit, even if there wasn't a situation where the client had a default or was showing some sign of financial insecurity. And so maintaining that cash so that you're able to use it, even if you have to pay a little bit of interest on it, may be a good strategy. Certainly consider canceling or reducing your summer projects, and go through your expenses line by line and determine what you can diminish or temporarily shut down until it becomes very clear what those decisions are going to be as far as restarting the operations there. So consider all of that, maintain your cash position going forward. If you do have underlying debt on your property, we would recommend that at this point you also be talking with your banker. Be transparent about your financial situation. We find that our clients get much better results when they're working in a general partnership with the lending institution as to how to get through a downturn. We found that it's taking little more than a phone call or a letter to your lender in order to get forbearance, where 3 to 6 months of mortgage payments can be deferred and added to the end of the term of the loan. Believe me, the banks don't want to have to foreclose on these loans, and they understand that this is hopefully a reasonably short-term scenario. So we found great cooperation from the bankers related to that. Additionally, you might look at exploring different avenues for funds. I know that Delta Tau Delta Fraternity has authorized an immediate $25,000 loan to any of its house corporations with basically a one-page application form. I think some of the other national organizations may have access to funds that they could provide to get you through the down points. Additionally, some of the states have disaster relief programs that you might investigate further. Early on, a lot of people thought that they might qualify for one of the federal emergency loan programs, whether that be the Paycheck Protection Program or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Unfortunately, the PPP program did not apply to fraternity and sorority organizations, which are typically a 501c7 and sometimes a 501c6 organization. The PPP program did apply to 501c3 groups and especially benefited those with employees. But for most of our groups, that was not an option for us. It did appear that the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program provided some opportunities for fraternity and sorority house corporations. It was allowed for 501c6 and 7 organizations, and it started out making a lot of promises. Unfortunately, those promises weren't delivered. We filed EIDL loan applications for about a dozen of our clients. We know of 2 clients that received a $1,000 grant, and we still have not heard back if they will be extended future or further loan assistance through the EIDL program. In essence, the program was overwhelming to the SBA. They weren't prepared for it, couldn't react soon enough, and now that program has been closed down completely except for agricultural corporations or family agricultural needs. So not a lot of benefit there for our EIDL programs. You highly suggest that you consider this a good time to consider a fundraising program. Certainly there's a critical need out there that's posed by this, and sharing a message that your chapter members are going to need assistance to continue to live in the chapter house is a pretty strong message that can bring in some money. Even if it's a relatively small amount of $10,000 to $20,000, that's something that can really help get you through the hump. So seek out your fundraising professionals related to this. We're going to be participating and co-hosting a seminar regarding looking at raising funds in a crisis situation and how to go about that with our fundraising partners, Columns Fundraising. That webinar is going to be on May 28th. But again, this is a great time to begin a giving program and to continue that giving program as an annual alumni dues program or an annual giving program. And beyond that, it may be time to consider a larger capital campaign that could not only help you get through this crisis, but reestablish the chapter houses as a real competitive asset for your members to live in. So just because we're in a down scenario, don't think that it isn't a good time to pursue a fundraising effort. I'll break briefly again for questions related to finances. A gentleman has asked a question about food safety guidance. Where do they go for guidelines for the kitchen? We have talked about that a little bit, Judy, and I will distribute this slide deck as well as a recording of our meeting tonight to all of the people that are participating, and we'll share those references within that. Beyond that, we're recommending that you reach out to your some of the food service providers, the catering companies. I know that Campus Fresh is one that has distributed a very strong COVID-19 procedure and protocol program of what they will be running. And I think that may even be posted on their website. But we'll also be seeing additional guidelines coming out through the ACHA, which is really focusing perhaps more on college dormitory cafeteria programs, but they will definitely have some good recommendations in there to take a look at as well. All right, just scanning real quickly to see if we have other questions. John, I still see you have a hand up. Is that a new question, or have we addressed it?
I just need to shut that off somehow.
Okay. No,
I'm good. Yeah.
no problems. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to close with our last segment, which is just a few minutes of discussion. And this is really a case where there's a saying that goes, never waste a good crisis. And here we have a scenario in which we are facing a crisis that's going to really require major changes. And if we have to go through a process of major change, perhaps we need to look at a larger picture and make changes that are going to make us more successful far beyond the COVID-19 crisis we're facing now. And from our view, we are seeing a trend away from the residential experience, particularly in fraternity housing. The fraternity houses don't seem to be as desirable to current students as they were perhaps a couple of decades ago. We see a lot of our properties that may not be competitive with other campus housing, especially these new luxury apartments that have popped up on a lot of the major campuses. I think that this is a product of over the last few decades that more and more of the chapter operations have fallen on the shoulders of the undergraduate leaders. And during the same period, the expectations, the regulations, the insurance requirements, and all of the other things have made the burden of running the daily chapter operations too much for the 19 and 20-year-old men to handle on their own and really deliver it in an effective manner. And anymore, we're seeing that the preference or the desired purpose of the chapter house is becoming a place to hold the large social events. So I think that for our own sake, it becomes important that we look at how do we change the residential experience to make it become a desirable part of what our members want to be involved with. And in talking with a lot of our house corporations, especially groups that we're just bringing on as new clients, when we talk with their house corporation on what they believe their role is, they look at it as being a landlord to just provide a house to the chapter members. And I really believe that that's a flawed outlook, that is too likely to set up an adversarial situation where it becomes landlord-tenant oriented rather than alumni and members working together for the common outcome that everybody is seeking. And so from that standpoint, I really believe that we need a intellectual paradigm shift there to look differently at our experience. And so I think that as a housing leader, we need to be looking at our mission is to deliver a great fraternity experience within the chapter house. And we need to understand that our chapter houses and our fraternity experiences have competitive advantages that other campus housing options just can't match. The brotherhood and living closely with other friends that you build great bonds with, the leadership opportunities, the training, alumni contacts, career guidance, especially if you look at surveys of especially fraternity members, they believe that one of the primary functions that a fraternity can serve is to help them be better prepared for their career and to develop connections and contacts and experiences that are going to allow them to accelerate their career beyond the pace of others that might not have these experiences. So looking at ways to restore some of these competitive advantages is, I believe, what we're going to really have to do to reverse the trend in fraternity housing. And so how do we start to look at what I call, making some lemonade out of lemons? And that's, again, using this crisis as the introduction for the undergraduate leaders to really do strategic planning and take a hard look at what it's going to do to maintain the chapter house as a viable housing entity for the chapter that can be sustained for many years to come. So revisiting live-in policies or developing agreements where the chapter is agreeing to pay a minimum level of rent to the house corporation, whether or not the chapter beds are full. We have some clients that are using a 2-year lease that must be signed before the member is initiated into the chapter house to maintain the full occupancy there. And then it becomes a situation that it's up to the chapter and the members to recruit into a situation in where members can apply to opt out of the second year of the lease rather than for the alumni corporations having to beg people to live in the chapter house. We believe strongly that anything that can be done to get upperclassmen living in the chapter house is a benefit. With respect to that, we suggest that officers be required to be live-in members. If they choose not to live in, that would be an automatic revocation of their officer status. We also have groups signing membership agreements that are contractual, in which a member would have to pay penalties if they chose not to honor a live-in requirement. So making some changes now to guarantee the sustainable funding and revenue stream to the chapter house is something that should be seriously considered. And beyond that, I think that, as I suggested before, that this becomes a case where we look at a way to restore the sorts of experiences that the members desire. And if you don't have a full chapter house, this might even be a scenario in which some of these opportunities are open only to the members that are living in the chapter house. But things like offering housing scholarships, programs where different resources or alumni are coming in to do resume reviews and hold mock interviews, leadership training, mentoring, developing alumni connections. Many of these things do not take a great effort to implement. And I know a lot of you are probably shaking your head and saying, you're trying to hold together a housing operation with just 2 or 3 alumni that are already burnt out, and how are you going to go about doing this? Well, first I would say, do what you can with your alumni and volunteer basis. But beyond that, there are companies that are going to be offering or are offering to provide some of these services on a contracted basis to to be the person that is coordinating and organizing these sorts of things. And this is an element of Alpha Fraternity management that we are going to be rolling out within the next year, to be able to offer a chapter services program where we can, for a set fee, deliver these sorts of competitive advantages to a chapter house, as well as working to develop a much more dedicated chapter culture that is more than just the social connection that most of our fraternities groups seem to have today. So, you know, in closing, we've got to get our alumni and undergraduate leaders to work together with your service providers to attack these immediate issues. We generally would like to see some greater alumni leadership in the housing program at this time to get over this immediate crisis. We have to make sure and deliver a clean and safe housing product. Excellent food service is critical to the fraternity and sorority experience. If you are a house corporation that's leaving it up to your undergraduates for developing their own food service program, I think that that's a missed opportunity. And then again, making sure our housing is providing great educational support. More than ever before, the greatest amenity desires that our members have are for blazing fast internet and smaller team studying areas with large screens that they can do presentations and do teamwork on. Those are critical issues. And then lastly, look to develop the income streams through fundraising and operations that are going to allow you to undertake a capital improvement program that can restore your chapter house to a truly competitive housing asset that the members are going to want to live in. Overall, if we can create these situations, share these amenities with our members and their parents, I think you're going to find a renewed desire to live in the chapter house and to have a sustainable product that's going to hold up for many years to come.
Yeah, and I had a question. This is Phil McCauley, Sigma Nu. Do you serve any, you're talking about the chapter services to differentiating ads services as a part of your offering. Do you currently or have in the past served any professional fraternities, whether they have or sororities, whether they have a chapter house or not?
We have not. We have focused on groups that are housing based. Mm-hmm. So we have worked with Evans Scholars groups. Mm-hmm. We have worked with some co-ops. We did also work with one legal fraternity, which I guess would be a little more of a professional fraternity. So we do have some of that experience. How can we apply that to this current situation?
Well, I think that's the question. I think social fraternities are becoming, in order to differentiate themselves and be more attractive, have to become more professional. And obviously professional fraternities are becoming more social. Each of them are going in the opposite direction. It's not like professional fraternities don't have parties, they do. So it's just that the social fraternities see the chapter house as the party palace. And that's, and it needs to be seen as more than that, as you're pointing out.
Yes, completely agree to that. I forecast, or I hypothesize that over the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to see dramatic changes with potentially alcohol being prohibited in the fraternity chapter houses. And that itself is going to require a dramatic change in programming and in a housing program delivery system that is going to be something that our members are going to want to be involved with if their fraternity experience is primarily focused on the social aspects of that. And to your point, Phil, I do think that we have to deliver some of these additional amenities and opportunities for the members And I think we have to help them find another avenue or another way to have their social outlets and be successful outside of the chapter house. We continue to work and have worked on several campuses in the South that have a completely different fraternity model. And there are campuses such as Louisiana State University that doesn't allow parties in their fraternity houses. They may be able to have a special event once or twice a year there, and with that special event, they have to hire licensed bartenders and hire security staff and some other things. But their whole campus culture has shifted to where those social events are taking place in bars, restaurants, hotels, and other venues where they've just learned to shift where those activities are taking place. So we have to change the culture as both undergraduate and alumni leaders. If we don't change the culture, I think we're in a situation where we're going to be forced to change the culture, where more universities are prohibiting fraternity and sorority organizations on campus, or providing more and more restrictions on them, or where it's going to become so difficult for us to find insurance for our groups that we're going to have to make the changes that direct us away from these social outlets. So, you know, it's our thought that we work with people now to take a leadership position in making those changes and be ahead of that curve, so that when it starts to happen, we'll be better, your group will be better positioned for success, and we'll have already shifted the culture in that direction.
I agree. Thanks.
Okay. Looking, I thought I saw, now that we had a question from Phil, that's who just asked the question. Any other questions that I may be able to answer for you?
Alan, how do we get a copy of the slide deck?
So if you registered for this program online with a leaving, you know, a copy of your email address, this will be emailed to you, if not tomorrow, on Monday. You'll have a full copy of the slide deck. We would also continue to invite you to check out our website for webinar series we have. This last topic that Phil brought up, we are going to be providing a series of webinars really targeted at the strategies to accomplish these recommendations in this last segment that I spoke to. Certainly, I would also recommend to feel free to contact our office if you have any questions regarding these issues or any other issues related to chapter operations, chapter facility management. We are helping many new clients launch their strategic plan for helping them address this COVID-19 issue. I think that if you investigate it, we are willing to develop a fee program that is manageable for your group, and many times you'll find that our services will more than pay for themselves. So we're happy to act as a resource. Please call or email. We would be you know, very happy to try to take this crisis and help everyone be successful through it. So with that, I thank you all for participating, and I'll sign off. I wish you the best, and let's make a difference for our members. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What?